Hey there, this is Ann Teagarden with episode 55 of the Unveiled podcast. Thanks for joining me today. Do you ever feel like you're doing most of the work at your home? I know sometimes it feels that way. Last week, I introduced a new series on the danger zones of marriage, and I talked about the importance of unity and being on the same team, and how there are these danger zones that things that we can do that will really undermine the unity. So, things you might not think about. All right, what's one of those little things that can begin to drive a wedge between you? Well, the first one I'm going to talk about is the feeling we sometimes have that we're doing most of the work around the house for the family, etc. Sometimes it's the wife that feels that way, sometimes it's the husband. But I will let you in on a little secret. It's often both. Oddly enough, this allocation of the workload can be a really tricky thing, and it's often changing based on our seasons or what jobs we have. We took our daughter off to college a few years ago and then realized halfway through the following day that no one had emptied the dishwasher. Who's going to empty the dishwasher? That was her job. Oh man, who's going to do it now? One more thing added to my list. Or we were smart and we assigned it to our son. Running a home is this never ending list of chores to do. I know that, you know that, we all experience it. So you have to figure out who does what, and it's going to look different for every family. But if you're feeling like you're doing most of the work, then that's really a red flag that there may be resentment rather than joy in the serving. It's the resentment that makes this issue so divisive. This feeling of resentment indicates there's disunity. Maybe you're not functioning as a team or feeling like a team. Now, notice I didn't mention whether or not you actually are doing most of the work. In the end, it doesn't matter. You don't want to have resentment over housework. Don't let vacuuming ruin your marriage because it's just not worth it. When there is a problem in marriage, it needs to be solved together as a team because resentment building up is one of the main things that will wreck a marriage. I talked a lot about resentment in episode 44, so you may want to go back and listen to that one if you haven't yet. Each of the things I'm going to talk about in this series can lead to resentment. So I'm really highlighting what might be the root of the resentment. Now, this is a little aside, but I can honestly say that each time Grant and I feel off kilter, not close, not unified, somehow the root always seems to be, or at least most of the time, seems to be resentment. We work through the resentment, we're back on track. All right, so back to feeling like you do most of the work. Well, there are some cases where one spouse really does contribute a lot and other one not at all. Maybe there's a health issue. Maybe it's something more severe like alcoholism or depression or addiction. Much of the time, though, each spouse feels like they are doing 80% of the work, and it's more of a perception problem. So it might help to write down everything you're responsible for, then write down everything your husband's responsible for, and then step back and look at it objectively. And take into account how many hours each of you is at work as well. Because if one's working part-time and the other is working full-time, well, then the part-time person may be doing more at home than the full-time person. That just makes sense. And if you have to reallocate things, see what each of you likes doing best and do those things, and then split up the things that neither one of you likes to do. Or outsource it when you have the money. You know, it's better to hire lawn guys than to fight about lawn chores every single weekend. And kids are great helpers too. Enlist them. Remember the dishwasher? Okay, if it's still looking lopsided after you've written it down and looked at it objectively, then ask your husband to look at the list. Let him know you're tired and you're feeling overwhelmed and it might be time to readjust things. And tell him you'd like his input to see if he has any ideas for making things work more smoothly. He may have an out-of-the-box idea you haven't even thought of. But do you see how approaching this issue from a team mindset is so much better than coming at him and accusing him of being lazy or insensitive or playing too many video games while you're doing all the work? If you come at it that way, it's just going to create defensiveness and it's probably going to demotivate him to help more. It really may be time to redistribute the work. Okay, life changes and it creates new responsibilities for one or both of you. Especially like when you had kids to the family, great time to redistribute things. Another thing that can skew your perception is if you're in the middle of a busy season. Sometimes life just comes crashing down with a gazillion activities all crammed into the same month. Maybe you've been traveling a lot, and so you're trying to catch up when you get home. This can cause you to feel really overwhelmed. So if you're feeling that way, you may want to analyze and say, am I in the middle of a busy season or just coming out of one? Because maybe in a week or so, you'll feel differently. That does happen. Bottom line, don't be mad about things over and over and over. That's a recipe for resentment. Instead, discuss it calmly and respectfully with your spouse and work it out. Venting, complaining does no good. Remember, you're a team and you're on the same team. All right, I have given you some very detailed, tangible ideas to help this situation if you're feeling that way. But let's back up and look at the big picture. It's okay to realize that things need to be reallocated so that everything gets done. You don't want the bills not being paid because someone got too busy. However, if you're keeping score, that's indicative of a bigger problem. The love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, puts it this way in verse 5. Love does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. We can't keep a record of wrongs and be happily married. It just doesn't work. Some people think marriage should be a 50-50 endeavor, and they get hung up on, I think I'm doing 60 and they're doing 40. But I've heard it said many times, and it's true, it should be more like each giving 100%. That's what makes it work. If we're both serving each other fully and cheerfully, then everything gets done, and we'll naturally pick up each other's slack as needed because we'll be working as a team. So, in review, examine your heart to get rid of any resentment over this issue and forgive anything that needs to be forgiven. Look at the work allocation objectively and see if it is lopsided. It may or may not be. Ask God for his perspective. If it needs to be fixed, work as a team to find a system that works for both of you. Understand the season you're in. Maybe one person does need to do less during this season, or maybe things need to be hired out. And finally, resist the urge to keep score. Serve out of love. Be a team. So I hope that you enjoyed a more practical marriage episode today. As always, though, we're looking underneath at what's going on in our hearts as well. Join me over the next few weeks for more danger zone topics, little things that can eventually sabotage marriage unity. Remember, God's got this. Bye-bye and have a great week.